I had no idea that a birthday party for my husband could go so badly wrong. We intended it to be a joyous event, Michael, but it turned into a nightmare that would always change our lives. The day began normally. My family and I live in a suburb of Boston. On Saturday, I woke up early to finish planning the party. It was Michael's 35th birthday, and I wanted to make it a special one since we had been married for 5 years. I hung out with his family, friends, and even some of his co-workers from the law company where he was a junior partner. When they put up streamers and flowers, I couldn't help but feel proud that our house was a charming colonial W-I'd. The location, which was purchased just 2 years ago, was ideal for such a gathering. The hardwood floors sparkled, and our newly remodeled kitchen was ready to wow our guests. I had spent weeks planning everything, from the menu to the decor, a playlist of Michael's best songs. Around 4 p.m., the first guests started to show up. Evening. Sarah, our amiable redhead friend, was a kindergarten teacher. She arrived with her husband Tom in tow. "This place looks amazing," she cried. Michael presented me with a beautifully wrapped gift. I smiled at the praise and led them into the living room where Michael was waiting. He continued to converse with his college roommate Dave as more people entered the house. The house was filled with the sounds of lively conversation. I quickly moved from group to group to make sure everyone had drinks and snacks. Michael's friends from the firm arrived, appearing slightly out of place in their usual casual attire. When they wore suits and ties to the odd office party, everything looked great. But there was a feeling that the tension I couldn't quite release was centered around one person, Evelyn, Michael's mother. I arrived slightly late, elegantly attired in a designer suit. I felt nervous because Evelyn had never shown interest in me. Observing our marriage as a sacrifice for her cherished son, she had repeatedly expressed her thoughts. It would have been better for Michael to marry someone other than a simple graphic artist like me. I tried to ignore those thoughts. Pay attention to being a competent hostess. This party wasn't just for Michael's birthday. This is also a way to express our gratitude to everyone who has helped us over the years, especially our friends who have made us feel welcome. We were interested in going to the neighborhood to meet Michael's bosses and teachers who had helped him move up in the company. Thank them all. As the night went on, I noticed Evelyn giving me sly looks. At first, she was mumbling under her breath, but I tried to ignore it and chalk it up to her. She acted normally, but her words became more audible and clearly intended for others to hear. To one of Michael's aunts, she said, "I can't believe she didn't get proper catering. A daughter-in-law should know how to throw a real party." I was so embarrassed that my cheeks hurt, but I put on a brave face. Michael smiled and continued to talk to other people. He didn't seem to notice his mother's jabs because he was too busy talking to other people. I wanted to ask him for help while he was with his co-workers, but I didn't want to make a scene. After all, when it came time to cut the cake, the party had already ended. I had spent a lot of money on a huge 3-tiered cake. I purchased a tiered red velvet cake from the best bakery in town. As I carried it out, everyone crowded around with candles lit. To sing Happy Birthday, Michael's face lit up, and I forgot about it for a second. I had done everything I could to see that smile on his face afterwards. After cutting and passing the cake, I believed the worst was over. I was wrong. As the party wound down, having a quiet moment with close family and a few straggling guests, Evelyn yelled, "I think it's time for the big event," she said, her voice resonating around the room. Michael was standing next to his mother, and Evelyn couldn't read the look on his face. That's when she dropped I know you all know that she started her voice off with a fake sweetness that would break our world. Things have been happening to us, and tonight we're going to do something big that will make my heart race. Race because I knew something very bad was going on. Michael's voice when he spoke was, "I thought it was time to give my mom the house, but he told me not to." For a moment, I thought I must have heard gift the house, the house we had saved for years to buy was the one I had put my whole heart and soul into making our home. I tried to blink, but couldn't. Evelyn slid a stack of legal papers onto the coffee table with a smug grin on her face as she thought about what was going on. She tapped her fiery red nails eagerly on the table. She told him straight out, You live there now, but it should belong to your family. As someone who understands the significance of sacrifice, I experienced a sense of depletion in the room. I moved in an uncomfortable way, feeling the stress but not knowing what to do. He looked around for a friendly face, someone who might speak up and say it was all a cruel joke. I don't understand why everyone turned away from the carpet or their drinks all of a sudden, finding them very interesting. I struggled to speak loud enough to ask Michael what was happening. However, Michael would look at me and watch over my shoulder. "It's for the best, K.O.," he said. His voice was emotionless. "Mom needs a place to stay, and this house is too big for just the two of us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This house, our home, had been our dream for so long. We spent many weekends house hunting, fighting over paint colors, and making plans for our future in the here and now. They wanted me to simply sign it, as it was a day of celebration. I said no, I won't sign anything because this is our home, even though my voice sounds strong. "Michael, we built this together." Evelyn's face turned into a mean frown. "Hardly, dear. This is what's best for the family. Don't you want it?" she yelled. Trying to figure out what was best for Michael brought tears to my eyes, but I blinked them away. I wouldn't give Evelyn feel good about making me cry. I said, "This isn't about what's best for Michael." My voice got stronger. "About you, Evelyn. It's always been about you." The mood was tense and the room went quiet. The skin was so thick that a knife could cut it. I looked at Michael and begged him to speak up for me. He stood there like a rock next to his mother, waiting for us. At that moment, I felt like I could not see anything on his face. I knew that the man I thought I knew, the man I married and built a life with, was someone I had never met before. When did they start making plans for this? How many nights did Michael lie next to me knowing he was going to betray me? The cruelest way possible. As the reality of the situation dawned, I experienced a peculiar feeling. I needed to calm down. This wasn't just about a house, it was about faith and respect. That built our marriage, and all of that in one fell swoop, Michael and Evelyn. It was all broken. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulder, and looked Evelyn straight in the eye. I said over and over, "I won't sign. This is my home, and I won't sign. Let me take it from you." The room became chaotic, and Evelyn began to yell. With ungrateful daughters-in-law and family duty, the guests who were still there began to pack up, ready to leave. Drama, and Michael did nothing but stand there, silent and still. The things we had built together fell apart around us, and I knew that this birthday party was just the start. I didn't know I had that much strength until that moment. The days to come would test me in ways I never thought possible. I was prepared to confront whatever awaited me. The room went silent. I stood my ground and refused to sign over our house. I could feel the weight of many eyes on me, a mix of, they had looks of shock, pity, and morbid interest on their faces, which made my heart race. I was certain that everyone could hear it, so I looked at Michael and silently begged him for some kind of backing or proof that this whole thing was a big mistake. Instead, he crossed his arms and nodded at the papers to instruct them. I was shocked. Not only was seeing this shocking, it was also planned. "I won't sign it." I said it again, my voice shaking but resolute. Stress began to permeate the air. Evelyn's face turned into an even meaner scowl, and she took a step toward me, her high-heeled shoes clicking in a scary way. "The wooden floor," she hissed. "Dear, don't make a fool of yourself." Her eyes flashed dangerously. I felt like a hunter squeezing its prey at that moment, but I refused to be like that. I was scared because this wasn't just a house. It was my home, which Michael and I had worked so hard to construct. It wasn't her right to take it from me, no matter what rules or customs she wanted to set. I looked around I was hoping to find a friend among our guests, but Sarah, who was supposed to be my friend, stayed away. I was immediately drawn to the pattern on her dress. It was Dave Michaels. My college friend moved around awkwardly and said something about wanting another drink. Even our neighbors, the Johnsons, who had been so friendly when we first moved in, were clearly eager to leave as they pushed their way to the door. I said in a louder voice, "This isn't right," as the scene played out. "You can't just come in here and demand that we give you our house," I said, facing Evelyn. "Michael and I bought it. We worked hard to make it a home, and you can't take Evelyn's place." I thought I saw steam coming out of her ears, and her nose flared up. "You're ungrateful, little dash," she said, but Michael told her, "Enough," in a cold, harsh voice. I looked at him with hope. I was confident that he would defend me and us at this point, but I was filled with anger and disappointment as I gazed into his eyes. "I just signed the forms. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I experienced a sense of impact. "Michael," I whispered to you, "how can you do this? This is our home, and we chose it together. Remember how we talked about raising our kids here and getting old together? Could you just give it away for a second?" I thought I saw a hint of doubt in his eyes, but Evelyn touched him. His shoulders and face hardened once more. "It's for the best," he said bluntly. "Mom needs a place to stay. It sounds like this house is too big for us. We should look for somewhere else." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I married the man I believed I knew better than anyone else, and now he was on my side. I told my mother, "I'm not ready to throw away everything we've worked on together." She shook her head. "I won't do it this time." "Michael, you should know that's not right. Can't you see the harm she's causing us?" Evelyn's face was very angry. "How dare you?" she screamed in response to everything. "Michael, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" When the situation deteriorated, Michael's face became red with anger, and his eyes glowed brightly. I had never seen him raged before. Abruptly, he strode over to the table containing the mess from his birthday cake. On Saturday, despite its partial consumption, it remained a stunning sight. 3 tiers of red velvet perfection covered it. I spent days planning it and working on it. Smooth cream cheese frosting covered it, and elaborate sugar flowers adorned the top. Michael chose to go to the bakery right away to make sure everything was just right. When he picked up the cake plate for a brief moment, I thought he was going to throw it or break it, but he didn't. I was terrified when his eyes met mine, as I recognized what he was about to do. "You are mocking us." He threw the cake right at my face. Time seemed to slow down as I saw the cake. I saw a flash of red and white flying at me. I heard gasps reverberating through the room, and then the cake hit me. With a shocking amount of force, I splattered paint on my face, hair, and clothes. Crumbs crawled into my eyes, nose, neck, and favorite. There was silence for a moment. I stood there, frozen in shock. With cake on my face, the room spun around me, and I felt as if I might faint. This couldn't be real. It had to be a terrible dream. But as I wiped frosting off my fingers, it was all too real. From my eyes, I saw Evelyn's beaming grin and heard her barely contained laughter. Michael stood there with his chest out, heave his hands, which were still sticky with frosting. Our guests' faces were a mix of horror and aversion. No one. Not sure what to do about this shocking turn of events, Michael told his voice horse to sign the forms now. Evelyn became enraged, slamming the pen on the table as she stared at me. "You heard him," she growled. "Just sign." I looked at the pen and then at the papers. When I looked at Michael, something within me broke. I didn't give up or break down the way they wanted. Instead, I felt a rush of... I walked out of the room without saying a word because I was so angry. I exited the premises with cake crumbs and frosting scattered across the floor, and I could hear Evelyn making a scene in the distance. Michael was yelling at me to come back, but I didn't listen. I walked out the front door and down the stairs. I could see where I was going from the porch steps and the side path. I had to leave that house right away. As I strolled down the street, still covered in dirt, I contemplated the situation. Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor, was watering her prized flowers when she fell down the stairs. Shocked, Mr. Thompson nearly collapsed during his evening jog. He gaped at me from the comfort of his own feet. Normally, I would have been embarrassed, but at that moment I couldn't. To bring myself to care, I walked for what seemed like hours but was probably only 30 minutes. It was a cool evening. The fresh air helped me clear my mind, and the sticky frosting on my skin kept me in touch with reality as I walked. I pondered what happened that night to figure out what was going on. How had a birthday party turned out? In such a bad dream? How could Michael, the man I loved and trusted, hurt me so badly? I finally found myself outside, wondering what the heck I was going to do next. I went to my best friend in Boston, Sarah's house. Despite her previous reluctance to get involved, I wasn't sure what to do. Then rang the doorbell. Sarah opened the door and saw me standing there with cake all over my face. She looked shocked, and her eyes grew wide in horror. "Oh my God," she gasped. "K.O. What happened? Are you okay?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I burst into tears, scared and shocked, and Sarah immediately grabbed my arm, showing no concern for my feelings. The sugar on her own clothes. "Come in," she said softly as she led me inside. "Let's clean you up first." I shared everything with Sarah because she assisted me in washing the cake out of my hair and provided me with clean clothes. She listened the whole time, which is admirable. Her face showed a mix of shock, anger, and pity. After I finished, Evelyn said, "I can't believe Michael did that. She sounds like someone I could believe, but Michael, I'm so sorry, K.O. I said I couldn't go back there because I felt numb and didn't know what to do next." Sarah grabbed my hand and said, "You stay here tonight," she said firmly. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. For now, you need to rest." Every time I closed my eyes that night in Sarah's empty room, I saw Michael's face. I couldn't sleep. Twisted with anger, I felt the cake strike me. I thought about our house, my house, and wondered what would happen there. What should happen now? Should Evelyn move in tomorrow? Should Michael let her? Hurt and betrayal, I felt something else stirring, a determination, a resolve. Even though I was covered in cake when I left, I wasn't crushed. I was ready to face whatever came next. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. In Sarah's spare room, the digital alarm clock on the table smiled at me as it kept going off every minute. All of them reminded me how my life changed in one night. The room felt strange. The scent of Sarah's laundry soap on the sheets was unfamiliar to me. I also didn't like the quiet hum of an air conditioner. I lay there looking at the ceiling for a long time, with streetlights casting shadows through curtains that weren't mine. I kept revisiting the events, reliving the shock of Michael's deception and the shame of having a cake thrown in my face. I had the terrible thought that my marriage might be over. It all whirled around in my head like a toxic whirlpool. I felt lost and alone. Float in a sea of doubt, holding on to the pieces of what I thought was a joyful life. As the night went on, I thought about better times, and remembered meeting Michael for the first time at a coffee shop near Boston Common. He accidentally spilled his latte on my sketchbook and, in his haste to clean it up, forced me to do it. If I remember right, that laugh had been the start of something beautiful. I recalled our first date, which took place at a picnic in a public yard. Michael had brought an excessive amount of food, seemingly overindulging. While we talked for 2 hours and fed the ducks, I was afraid I would go hungry during our 2-hour date. I remembered how beautiful his eyes were, and how his smile made me feel safe and loved. Then there was the day as they walked along the beach at sunset on a weekend trip to Cape Cod, he asked her to marry him. He proposed to me in the sand, and I was filled with joy and certainty that our love would endure forever. Partnership. I realized how foolish I'd been. But now, in Sarah's spare room, alone, those feelings have returned. It felt like memories were corrupted. Had it all been a lie? Had Michael always been able to having been so wicked and I hadn't noticed? Or had something changed? The transformation of the man I loved into someone I barely knew was profound. I thought of Evelyn and her smug face as she'd gave them those papers. How long had she been planning this? Had she always seen? I viewed them as a passing inconvenience, someone to discard when the time was appropriate. It enraged me that I hadn't confronted Evelyn sooner, and not just directed my anger at her. The first signs of dawn. As the sun rose, I couldn't resist thinking about our house, specifically mine. We looked for a house for months, and I remembered how excited we were when we finally found the right one. I have fond memories of the time spent painting walls, the fights over where to put furniture, and the dinner parties that would happen in every room. Everywhere we went, we built a piece of our life together, and now Evelyn wanted to erase me. I left that house as if I had never been there. The mere thought of it caused my heart to swell. Besides the building, it was about my life, dreams, and future. I worked hard to make that house a home, and I wasn't going to give up without a fight. I woke up to the sound of birds singing outside and bright sunlight streaming in. I must have dozed off at some point. Through the gaps in the curtains. For a moment I felt lost, but then I remembered what happened the night before, coming back to me, and I felt a new wave of pain wash over me. I reached for my phone on the table and noticed that it was missing. It was almost 7 a.m. I missed a few calls and texts from Michael, and my heart jumped into my throat. Although I debated whether to listen, I hoped he was calling to apologize and that it had all been a mistake. It was a terrible mistake, but a stronger part of me knew better and was shaking. I played the first message with my fingers. Michael's voice sounded slightly slurred. He smelled like he had been drinking. "K.O., where are you? Come home. We need to talk." I deleted it without listening to the rest because you're being silly about this. The texts were even worse. They were a mix of angry requests to know where I was and pathetic tries to explain why Mom needs our help. One reads, someone who was being selfish said something else. There was not a single explanation or notice provided. He had hurt me deeply. I put the phone down, feeling a strange mix of sadness and anger. I felt both sadness and relief that Michael hadn't miraculously transformed back into the man I believed I had married. Sarah softly knocked on the door, ensuring that empty vows and fake apologies had not swayed me. Later, she poked her head in with a worried smile and said, "Hey, how are you? Do you feel better?" I sat up and ran my hand through my knotted hair. I expressed to her my belief that betrayal and cake frosting had struck her. Sarah's smile grew. She came over to sit on the edge of the bed and seemed sympathetic. I made her coffee and called in sick to work. "Thanks, Sarah. I felt grateful when I realized you might need a friend today." "I don't know what I'd do without you," I said in a teary voice over coffee. I informed Sarah about Michael's texts, which she then read. "Every word he says makes Storia's face grow bigger," she mumbled as she threw a cake at him. "I stared at you and then acted as if you were being unreasonable." I nodded and stared into my coffee cup. I can't stop thinking about I told them about our housework and plans. I couldn't believe he was so willing to give it away. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" I had been asking myself all night, what am I going to do? The thought of going back to that made me feel sick. The house of Michael and Evelyn made me sick, but giving up and letting them win made it worse. What was worse? "I don't know," I said slowly, "but I know I won't let them pick on me. I worked hard for that house, Sarah. It's mine just as much as it is yours. Michael's. Or maybe even more so mine, since I picked out the paint colors. Who planted the yard and made it a home? I won't let Evelyn Wilson take it all away," Sarah said. "I am aware that this is the KO she was referring to. Therefore, what was the initial action I took?" Taking a deep breath, I can feel a sense of purpose beginning to form. I think I mentioned that I needed to consult a lawyer to understand my rights and my options. Sarah agreed. "That's a good idea. I have a friend who specializes in family law. You can call her if you want to." I said, "Please," and nodded. "I think I need to." When I saw the alarm go off, I quickly added that I was going back to the house today instead of staying. Sarah's face, "But I need to get some things and let Michael know that this Sarah looked scared. Are you sure that's a beneficial idea?" Maybe you should. I told them to wait a few days and let things cool down, but they shook their heads. They were sure I need to do this right now, not later. If I wait, Evelyn might have already moved in. Sarah told me that I need to make it clear to them that I'm not going to back down. After a moment, she said, "Okay." She added, "But I'm coming with you. You shouldn't have to." When we were alone with them after coffee and getting ready, I had a lot of different feelings. Fear. There was anger, resolve, and a deep sadness for what I had lost beneath it all. I also felt something else, something new and strong. I wept all night, but I was tired of suffering for Mary and Michael. They chose the wrong woman to play with. They thought they could bully me, shame me, and push me out of my own life. They were. As I borrowed some of Sarah's clothes and prepared to face the day, I realized how wrong they were. I promised myself that I would live my life, work, and play here. I had to fight for it with everything I had. The ride back to my house felt strange. I was sitting in my familiar Boston neighborhood while Sarah drove her small car through the streets. As I sat in the passenger seat, my heart raced with a mixture of worry and determination. The morning sun cast long. As we turned onto my street, the dark shapes across the road gave me a sense of impending war. The sight of a large moving truck with neat stacks of boxes inside startled me. In the driveway for a moment, Michael had already started moving my car and I felt scared. We were trying to figure things out, but as we drew closer, I realized something wasn't quite right. My things were all over the lawn and I could see Evelyn's decorations, ugly family pictures. She insisted that we hang up the ugly family pictures and other items she had temporarily stored. Over the years, Sarah whistled low. "It appears that someone has been occupied," she remarked as she arrived. I took a deep breath and told myself, "Let's do this." I talked more to myself than to Sarah. The front door opened as we got closer to the house. Michael stood on the steps. His face appeared pale and drawn, as if he hadn't slept. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled throughout the night. When he caught sight of me, his appearance worsened, eyes widened with a combination of relief and apprehension. K.O. called out his voice, "Horse, where have you been? I've been trying all night to get in touch with you." I didn't pay attention to him. I was looking around at the scene when I saw Evelyn. As she emerged from behind the moving truck, dressed in her usual expensive attire, she gazed straight ahead. I felt out of place among the boxes and general chaos. Evelyn's expression quickly changed when she saw me. Changes, confusion, anger, and then shock when she understood what was happening to her things. "What does this mean?" She yelled, "Michael, what's going on?" in a loud voice. I stepped forward with a boost of confidence and said, "I'm reclaiming my space." The voice is strong and clear. "Your belongings are no longer welcome here." Michael. He walked down the porch steps with a confused and angry look on his face. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You can't just dash when you're barely holding back your anger." Facing him straight on, I told him, "This is my home, Michael. It's mine and yours, not yours." Mother Evelyn's face twisted with anger as she stepped forward with her designer. Her heels gently sank into the soft yard grass. "You ungrateful little dash," she started, but I stopped her. "I wouldn't finish that line if I were you, Evelyn." I told you my voice was icy. "Unless you want it used against you in court," that stopped her in her tracks. Spluttered, "What are you talking about?" I smiled slightly, feeling a sense of understanding. I felt in charge like I hadn't in years. "Oh, I forgot to say I turned a little and pointed to the car, where a well-dressed woman was now getting out. "This is M. Wright. She's here to make sure everyone knows their legal limits from today on." Monsieur Wright, the lawyer Sarah had put me in touch with, walked up to me with confidence. She was wearing an elegant briefcase, phrase that meant, "Business good morning," she said clearly. "We have some things to talk about," Evelyn said as she stared at Ms. Wright. Michael looked at Evelyn. Between us, his face showed a mix of shock and rising awareness. "K.O.," he said. He asked in a low voice, "Can we talk about this privately?" I shook my head. I added, "You can say anything in front of M. Wright and Sarah." With a nod to his friend, who stood nearby as a silent rock of support, Michael ran his hand through his hair. He muttered, "This is ridiculous." With whole-body anger, "You are exaggerating everything. We were only trying to help Mom Dash by kicking me out of my own home. When I got home, someone surprised me at a birthday party while I was angry. Are you forcing me to give up my rights at a party? That doesn't help Michael." Trickery and abuse. Evie, who had been unusually quiet, spoke out all of a sudden. She found her voice and hissed, "You can't do this." Her eyes darted between me and Miss Wright. This house should be a family home. As I read this, I felt calm come over me, stared at her. "I'm family, Evelyn. Or at least I was." "You just never saw me that way," I said. "How did you manage to put up with me until you could figure out a way to get me out?" Monsieur Wright stepped forward, making Mrs. Evelyn pay attention. She said in a professional but firm voice, "I have to tell you to stop harassing people any further. We have documented the events from last night and have sufficient evidence to proceed. By law, if needed." Evelyn's mouth moved back and forth, but nothing came out. For perhaps the first time since I'd known her, she seemed at a loss for words. Michael, however, was far from quiet. "You!" he shouted, his face flushed with anger. "You're ruining everything. Do you have any idea what this will damage my job and our reputation?" I met his glare with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. "Michael, you made a mistake when you chose your mom over me." I took a deep breath. "You made the decision to prioritize her needs over our marriage, our home, and our shared life. I've finally let go of years of repressed feelings. I've given you more chances than you deserve." I pointed vaguely at the driveway and the paper-stained memories from the previous night, indicating that they deserved this. This was the last blow. Sarah came up next to me and put a hand on my shoulder. She told Michael and Evelyn K.O., "My shoulder, I think it's time for you both to leave," in a firm voice. Clear Evelyn attempted to relax as she became aware of her surroundings. She put on a cold mask of anger and spat out one last threat. "You'll regret this. Do not think for a second that you have won this, K.O." Her confidence was hollow, and we beat her. She didn't need to express herself. Everyone understood her actions. She turned on her heel and stalked towards her car, her movements stiff from the shock. Holding back his anger, Michael paused, his shoulders sagging in defeat for a moment. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I loved, weak and unsure. "Where should I go?" he inquired, his voice feeble and momentarily filled with hopelessness. Through me, we had shared our life goals and hopes with each other. When I thought about the cake smashing into my face, the mean words, and the betrayal, my resolve grew stronger. "That's not my problem any longer, Michael. I told you in a firm but kind voice. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." He stared at me for a long time, his face showing a wide range of feelings. He turned around and walked away, following his mother to the car as they drove off. I felt a strange mix of happiness and sadness. Some parts of my life were ending, but others were starting. M. Wright first looked at me, her face a little less serious as she said, "You did." She said, "Let's go inside and talk about what to do next. We have a lot of there is work to ensure the protection of your rights." I nodded, feeling very thankful for what this woman does for a living. Sarah squeezed my arm to cheer me up and support ISM as we walked. When I got into my house, I stopped for a moment to take a deep breath. The strange sights and sounds of this place, which had been tense and painful only hours before, captivated me. It felt like a fresh start for my life. On my own terms, I turned to Sarah and M. Wright and smiled a little. I gushed, "I guess it's time to start moving forward." With that, we went inside, ready to face any problems that might come our way. I was ready to walk the road by myself for the first time in a long time. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Holding my head high, the weeks following the fight were a whirlwind of legal and emotional meetings. Despite the upheavals and small wins, Am I Right, my lawyer, came through for me. Your calm demeanor and razor-sharp mind gave me the confidence I didn't have before to deal with the difficulties of my situation. I knew that the first thing we had to do was file for divorce. It wasn't an easy choice, but after what? Monsieur Wright told me what to do, and I knew there was no turning back from what Michael had done. Relief. Although I hadn't planned for my marriage to end this way, I knew it was inevitable. Remember what Monsieur Wright said during one of our meetings? She looked at me with kind eyes but firm limits. We're fighting for more than just your house. We're fighting for your right to live your life the way you want to. Became my mantra. In the days that followed, I said it to myself whenever I felt weak or questioned my choices. Boundaries can't be negotiated. The legal processes were getting heated, and Michael urged Evelyn would have fought back against everything they said about me leaving the marital home that I was in. I was so unstable mentally that I always planned to use Michael's success against him. Each accusation hurt, but I refused to let them see me fail. Instead, I threw myself into building my case. I gathered financial records. To show what I've done for our family, I got letters from friends and neighbors attesting to my character and how much I cared about our home. And maybe worst of all, I had, is it possible that they are attempting to portray you as the villain by utilizing the photographs and anecdotes of those who attended the birthday party? One afternoon, as we sifted through documents in her office, she explained, "We have the truth on our side, and it is emotional abuse and manipulation were directed at you." Hearing those words, emotional abuse felt like a punch to the gut. The gut part of me wanted to deny it, to believe that our marriage couldn't have been that bad. But as I looked back on the longer I was with Michael, the more trends I saw that I hadn't seen before because of how he always criticized me. Giving in to his mother's wish is a sly attack on my confidence. It was all there. I just hadn't wanted it. I focused on reclaiming my space while the court case was ongoing. In my life, I painted the living room a peaceful sage green, a color Michael had always warned me not to use. I rearranged the furniture and donated items that brought back negative memories. Gradually, the house began to feel like home, my home again. Sarah was there for me the whole time. She helped me pack up Michael's stuff and heard me rant and cry. She told me, "You're the strongest person I know," and then reminded me to eat when I forgot to. That night, we drank a bottle of wine on my newly rearranged porch. Remember, it wasn't just that. Sarah, to my surprise, I got help from someone I didn't expect. Mrs. Johnson, our during the birthday party mess, the next-door neighbor who seemed eager to leave, showed up one day with She opened her eyes and gave me a hug and a dish. I should have said something that night, Misty. I'm sorry I didn't. I want you to know that we're all pulling for you now, sweetheart. I gradually realized that I wasn't the only one going through this. Evelyn had attempted to turn this fight in my community against me, pulling together behind me instead. Of course, things weren't always easy. On days when everything felt too heavy, I would wake up and reach for Michael, only to realize he was no longer there. I would see joyful couples on the street and think of what might have been, but I wouldn't let those thoughts get in the way of my plans. Instead of letting those times define me, I put my energy into rebuilding my life. I started putting more effort into my graphic design work by taking on new clients and being more creative. She was working at a nearby women's shelter and found healing in helping others who had experienced similar experiences. Even when Michael tried to get in touch with me through texts that changed all the time, I stuck to my limits. When someone asked me to choose between angry charges and pleas for peace, I didn't respond. Evelyn tried to corner me at the grocery store and started a conversation about family loyalty. I just walked away. She yelled at me, "Get away from us. You can't ignore us forever." But I could, and I did. My power came from being quiet, and my limits were my shield. The turning point happened twice. A few months into the case, Ms. Wright called me into her office. Her normally serious face broke into a smile. She said with a smile, "We've got them," as she slid a paper across her desk. "A lawyer has asked for a deal." As I scanned the paper, my heart was racing. Michael was willing to pay significantly more than the house's value in order to convince me to move out. In turn, he wanted a quick sale. If there was an uncontested divorce, neither party would have any more claims, and there wouldn't be a long court fight. "What do you think?" Monsieur Wright asked. "Are you paying close attention?" "It's a fantastic deal, K.O. In fact, the choice is yours." I sat back with my mind racing. Part of me wanted I was prepared to fight to keep this going and make Michael pay for all the pain he had caused me. But then I thought about it. I discovered that this house, which I cherished, was also packed with, I said in a steady voice, "I'll take it." I pondered over a life I no longer desired. It's only fair that I stay in the house for 30 days after the sale. I need to say goodbye properly. Ms. Wright nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. I believe we can all agree that the following month was a whirlwind of paperwork, discussions, and preparations. I felt more and more at peace as it all went on. I was concluding a phase of my life. Yes, I was living life, but I was also embarking on a new journey as an author. I was able to respect my boundaries and create the life I truly desired. On my last night in the house, I had a friends and family party. The celebration was not as extravagant as Michael's tragic birthday, but rather a modest gathering. Sarah and Mrs. were present at the gathering of individuals who had assisted me throughout my journey. Johnson and a few other neighbors, Emma Wright, also showed up, and for once she let her professional air down as she laughed and told each other stories. As I looked around at these people in the house I had fought for and was now leaving, I felt this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something I want to do. "Thank you all," I said, as I raised my glass in a toast for your help and kindness. This house was worth fighting for because it made me remember who I am. I have grown increasingly conscious of the significance of the inner strength, dignity, and rights that each of us possesses. Following rules is what truly defines a home. There were tears, hugs, and laughs. Says they'll stay in touch. After the last guest left, I stood in the living room and ran my hand along. I bid farewell to the sage green walls I had painted. I didn't say this to the house, but to the I used to be someone who let other people decide how much she was worth and settled for less than she earned. As I lay in bed that final night in that house, I didn't feel sad or guilty. Instead, I felt a sense of I was excited that tomorrow I would walk out that door as K.O., not as Michael's wife or Evelyn's daughter-in-law. As I dozed off, K.O. was strong, tough, and ready for whatever came next. Before I fell asleep, the last thought that crossed my mind was the proverb that had guided me through these challenging months. Boundaries are non-negotiable, and I didn't know it was my happiness the longer I left last morning. The last time I saw my old house, the sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky different shades of pink. Gold. I stood on the front steps with the keys in my hand and took one last look at the place. That had been the origin of so much joy and sorrow. I inhaled deeply and inserted the key into the lock for the final time. Walked away without looking back. Sarah was ready to drive when I got to her car. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as we pulled away from the street on the way to my new apartment. "Are you okay, Sarah?" Gazing at me with concern, I nodded, a realization that surprised me with its accuracy. "Yes, I really am," I said with a small smile on my face. "It feels like I can breathe again." My new flat was in a different part of Boston, a busy area full of young people, pros and artists. It was smaller than my old house, but as I went through the rooms, I got The first few weeks were a blur of moving, putting furniture in order, and exploring a possibility I hadn't felt in years. Once I adjusted to my new schedule, I began organizing. I chose colors and styles that were all my own. I made every choice without giving in on decor or skirting Evelyn's views. It was a celebration of my sudden freedom on a sunny Saturday about a month ago. Sarah came over after I moved in to help me hang some art. As we relaxed and enjoyed our work, Sarah turned around to me with a grin. "You know, I don't think I've ever seen you look so at peace." I thought about what she said and realized it was true. I feel at peace now. For the first time in a long time, I told them that I felt like I was exactly where I should be. That peace didn't mean the trip was over, but I still had problems to solve and wounds to heal. I began seeing a therapist, doctor. The lesson helped me deal with the emotions that arose after my marriage and divorce. Our meetings were often hard. I am bringing up memories and feelings I tried to hide. It's okay to still feel mixed feelings about Michael. During one especially difficult session, Lassen told me, "You shared a life with him. It's okay to remember what embrace the things you've lost while being proud of the steps you've taken." Those words resonated with me and guided me through the challenging times. Complicated feelings sometimes threatened to overwhelm me. There were times when I missed the comfort of my home. It was lonely to start over in a new life, but I told myself being alone was better than losing myself in a relationship that didn't value me. As the months went by, I slowly came to terms with this. I started to rediscover aspects of myself that I had suppressed during my marriage. I picked up painting again, which was something I had stopped doing. In college, I rejoined a group that I had previously abandoned due to Michael's complaints about the mess and the time it consumed. I am enjoying the intellectual conversations and new friendships I am making at my local book club, my graphic design group. My design business began to flourish, relieving me of the burden of constant caution at home. I found as my creativity grew, I took on more difficult projects that pushed my skills to new heights. One day, as I was pudding, I realized I was humming to myself as I put the finishing touches on a branding package for a new eco-friendly business. Even though I was truly happy and interested in my work, things didn't always go as planned. The divorce process was lengthy, and occasionally, Michael or Evelyn encountered court issues. Some parts of the town were affected, but Monsieur Wright, as usual, took care of them all. Remember that Grace and her drive helped her get through a particularly frustrating day of court. When they fight back, it proves you made the right choice and they're gone. You're stronger now, and I was stronger every time I stood my ground. Rather than giving in to pressure or guilt trips, I became more determined. The woman who had been so eager to please suddenly became more determined. She left behind peace and brought with her a person who valued her and was prepared to sacrifice everything for it, afraid to expect respect. About 6 months after I'd moved into my new place, I got an unexpected letter from Michael. For a moment, I almost threw it away before I opened it, but my interest got the best of me, and inside I found a short note, "K.O. I owe you an apology. I was wrong about so many things, and I'm sorry. For the pain I caused you, I'm getting help trying to understand why I acted the way I did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand my mistakes. I hope you're doing well, Michael." I sat with that. I had been reading the letter for a long time, and emotions were coursing through me. There was a moment when these words would have made my day. I thought about giving our relationship another chance because of my resolve, but now I saw them for what they were. Michael's journey took a step forward, but it didn't change mine. I showed the letter to Lassen in our next meeting and asked him how he felt about it. She looked at me closely and asked, "How does it make you feel?" I gave it some thought for a while. "Moments made sense," I finally said, and I felt a little sad, I guess. We might have had a relationship if he had known these things sooner, but I feel free and like this is the end. Dr. Lassen gave me a small smile and nodded to let me know I had made the right choice. Her face, that's growth KO, being able to understand the complicated feelings without. As the end of my first year of independence drew near, I decided to throw a party. I was pretty much settled in by that point, but I still wanted to celebrate the start of a new life, so I asked Sarah. The friends I made in my book club, including Mrs. Johnson, came because we had stayed in touch despite living far apart. I even invited Miss Wright arrived with a bottle of champagne and a warm embrace. As I looked around the gathering, I was struck by it was a far cry from the awful birthday party a year ago. There was laughter, genuine warmth, and a sense of togetherness. These people liked me for my simple friendship, not for what they did. They wanted me to raise my glass in a toast. I got emotional a year ago. My voice began to shake slightly. I felt a sense of impending doom and a sense of disorientation. I felt betrayed and alone, but as I stood here, I understood that what I thought was the end was really the start. As I looked at the smiling faces, I felt a rush of thanks for each of you, played a part in my journey, and I'm grateful for that. Here's to new beginnings, discovering your true self and embracing the we choose our own family. Sarah walked up to me and said, "You did it." A soft voice said, "K.O., you really did it." I smiled because I knew she was telling the truth. I did it. I overcame my fears, advocated for myself, and shaped my life into what it truly deserved, truly my own. It hadn't been an easy trip, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but I was ready for them. The next night, as I was cleaning up after the last guest had left, I caught a glimpse of them in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was not the same as the one who had been shocked and covered in birthday cake a year before. The woman was taller, her eyes were brighter, and she was more sure of herself. She had been through a storm. I will emerge stronger on the other side. As I got ready for bed, I thought about how hard I had fought for the idea of home. I looked for a house because I thought it would make me happy, but now I know that home wasn't a place I could see. It was about feeling safe, loved, and true to yourself. As I crawled into bed, I felt a profound joy as tomorrow presented a fresh day brimming with prospects. I was excited to see what it would bring for the first time in a long time. As I fell asleep, I smiled to myself. It was a whole new book, not just a new chapter, and I couldn't wait to write it.